Both the Corsairs of Umbar and their haven's original occupants, the Black Númenóreans, had their own separate reasons for hating the men of Gondor and serving Sauron. The rider was robed all in black, and black was his lofty helm, yet this was no ringwraith, but a living man. The lieutenant of the Tower of Barad-dûr he was, and his name is remembered in no tale, for he himself had forgotten it, and he said,
"I am the mouth of Sauron."
But it is told that he was a renegade, who came of the race of those that are named the Black Númenóreans, for they established their dwellings in Middle-earth during the years of Sauron's domination, and they worshipped him, being enamored of evil knowledge. The great cape and landlocked firth of Umbar had been Númenórean land since days of old, but it was a stronghold of the Kingsmen, who were afterwards called the Black Númenóreans, corrupted by Sauron, and who hated above all the followers of Elendil. After the fall of Sauron, their race swiftly dwindled, or became merged with the men of Middle-earth, but they inherited without lessening their hatred of Gondor. Now the Black Númenóreans stretched their heritage to the Kingsmen. It was during the reign of Taran-Kaliman, the 14th king of Númenor, that the people split off into two main factions. One was represented by the Faithful, or the Elendil, who still revered Ilúvatar and the Valar and maintained friendship with the elves. And the second was the Kingsmen, who, desiring power and light beyond their allotted span, turned against the Valar and envied the elves. As I have mentioned before, the King's men sailed back to the eastern and southern coasts of Middle-earth to establish strongholds like Umbar, from when they ruled over the natives such as the Haradrim. Eventually, Sauron lured them into his service, teaching them sorcery and promising them deliverance from death. These renegades came to be known as the Black Númenóreans, or Sauronians, because they worshipped him. They had a deep hatred for the remnant of the faithful, the followers of Elendil, for opposing their dark master. Over time, they mingled with the men that they reigned over, passing on to them their disdain for the heirs of Elendil. Umbar remained a seat of power for the enemies of Gondor ever since. Nevertheless, there remain some pure-blooded Black Númenóreans among Sauron's servants, such as his chief emissary, the lieutenant of the Tower of Barad-dûr himself, the mouth of Sauron. During the kinstrife that led to Gondor's costly civil war, a great many of its invincible navy supported the usurper, who was challenging the king's right to rule the country. Eventually he was overthrown, and the rightful king restored to the throne, driving the rebels to found their own province and declare themselves under self-rule. They never ceased to make war upon Gondor, attacking its ships and coasts when they had the opportunity. But they married women of the Harad, and had in 3 generations lost most of their Númenórean blood, but they did not forget their feud with the House of Eldacar. The Corsairs of Umbar traced their origins to the kinstrife, a civil war between the rightful 25th king of Gondor, Eldacar, and the usurper, Castamir, who enjoyed a great naval support from the havens of Pelargir and Umbar. After the usurper was slain and the king restored to the throne, the rebels led by Castamir's sons fled to Umbar and established their own independent lordship. Over the generations, time in which they mingled with the nearby Haradrim, they became a lot of renegade sailors, brigands, and mercenaries who, at the helm of a sizable fleet of black ships, preyed on the ships and coasts of Gondor during troubled periods such as the Great Plague and the Long Winter. Sauron had realized their usefulness and had brought them to his banner as privateers, probably around the time his emissaries were stirring up the Haradrim. Aside from the Corsairs' vendetta against their old kinsmen, greed was just as great, if not greater, an inducement for aiding the Dark Lord. On their way to join the armies of Mordor in the siege of Gondor during the War of the Ring, the Corsairs of Umbar raided settlements up to Lebanon. It is likely that Sauron had promised these mercenaries from the coast plentiful booty in Minas Tirith. Let us now turn westwards to the Dunlandings, wild men who fought for Sauron and his depreciatus servant, Saruman, for the same reason as the Haradrim did: revenge. They hate us, and they are glad, for our doom seems certain to them. The king, they cry. We'll take their king. Death to the foregirl, death to the strawheads, death to the robbers of the north. Such names they have for us. Not in half 1,000 years have they forgotten their grievance that the lords of Gondor gave the mark to Eorl the Young and made alliance with him. The Rohirrim's ancestors, the Eotheod, led by Eorl, had answered the Gondorians' call for aid during the Battle of the Field of Celebrant. Their intervention had saved the day. As a reward, Gondor granted these Northmen the province of Calenardhon, which became the Kingdom of Rohan, with Eorl as its first king. But Calenardhon and the Vales of the Ered Nimrais were already occupied by wild men who were gradually driven out and into the hills of Dunland between the reigns of Eorl the Young and Aldor the Old, the third king of Rohan. During the next 500 years, these swarthy, dark-haired savages made frequent attacks upon the outlying settlements of Rohan, exacting revenge upon the usurpers, whom they called Strawheads because of the high number of blonde warriors among them. The greatest attack came during the long winter and the reign of Helm Hammerhand, the 9th king of Rohan. The Dunlandings, in league with eastern invaders, overran Rohan and forced the Rohirrim into hiding at Helm's Deep and Dunharrow. Their lord, Wulf, took Edoras and sat in Meduseld and called himself king. The fact that they were eventually repelled after the long winter's end only strengthened the wild men's resolve. Soon enough, they find a new, willing ally. We will have peace when you and all your works have perished, and the works of your dark master, to whom you would deliver us. You are a liar, Saruman, and a corrupter of men's hearts. His friends and servants, Saruman drew then from all who hated Gondor and Rohan, whether men or other creatures more evil. Although he had become an obsessed servant of Sauron, Saruman still wanted to try claim the One Ring for himself, but needed to feign allegiance and deliver the Rohirrim to his dark master. Therefore, the wizard surrounded himself with the enemies of the Horse Lords, and the Wild Men were chief members of this category. A deceiver, much like his liege, Saruman had but to stoke the Dunlandings' already great hatred of the Rohirrim and tell them what they wanted to hear, that they needed to take back the lands that were stolen from them. He then armed the wild hillmen and herdsfolk of Dunland and loosed them upon the villages of Rohan's Westfold to slay every man, woman, and child who lived there. The Dunlandings were not the only men who had used to live in or about the White Mountains that were aligned with Sauron. The dead men of Dunharrow were of their kin. Known better in Peter Jackson's adaptations as the Army of the Dead men of Dunharrow were former servants of Sauron. During the years of Sauron's dominion in the Second Age, these people that dwelled in the White Mountains had worshipped him. Following the founding of Gondor, their king had made an oath to Isildur, promising to fight for him. Nonetheless, so strong had been their loyalty to Sauron that when Isildur called upon them during the War of the Last Alliance, they refused to fight against their former liege. For failing to honor his oath, Isildur said to their king, "Thou shalt be the last king, and if the West prove mightier than thy black master, this curse I lay upon thee and thy folk, to rest never until your oath is fulfilled. For this war will last 3 years uncounted, and you shall be summoned once again ere the end." There were also other hillmen similar to the Dunlandings, those being the Hill-men of Rhudaur, who sided with another one of Sauron's servants, in this case the Witch King of Angmar. Once again, greed, this time coupled with ambition, led to men subjecting themselves to the Dark Lord or one of his agents. Rhudaur had used to be part of Arnor, the North Kingdom led by the heirs of Isildur, whereas the Dunedain continued to abide in the realms of Arthedain and Cardolan. The line of Isildur had failed in the land of Rhudaur, where power was seized by an evil lord of the Hillmen, who was in secret league with Angmar. Rhudaur had long desired to possess the Weather Hills, especially the Tower of Amon-Sul, that housed one of the 7 Palantiri, and its expansionary policy was supported by Angmar. The very last of the wicked men that fought for Sauron were found in the east, and were the men of Khand, the Variags. Many of the Wain Riders now passed south of Mordor, and made alliance with men of Khand and of Nir Harad, and in this great assault from north and south, Gondor came near to destruction. That is actually one of the few passages where the Variags are mentioned, and when they are usually found in alliance with the Easterlings, and Haradrim, themselves servants of Sauron. In fact, all we know is that, encouraged by the emissaries of Sauron to wage war against the Gondorians, the Wain Riders, one of the Easterling tribes, forged an alliance with the Variags and the Haradrim. Together, this league led a devastating attack on Gondor from both the north and the south, but was ultimately defeated by General Eärnil. Khan's host later fought as part of the armies of Mordor in the siege of Gondor during the War of the Ring. The Variags were loosed into battle together with the Easterlings and Haradrim by Gothmog, the lieutenant of Morgul, following the death of the Witch King of Angmar at the hands of Éowyn and Merry. While we are not told exactly why the Variags were aiding Sauron, I think we can safely speculate that faith, greed, envy, savagery, or revenge was one of the reasons. Who knows, they might as well have been mercenaries, much like the seafaring Corsairs of Umbar. Thank you for watching, and if you have any other video suggestions, let me know.